All right, and this is part two of our top stories of 2015 in the sort of, I guess, alternative fringe realm. And again, I'm here with Joshua Cutchin, Michael Hughes, and Red Pill Junkie. Everyone doing all right?
Oh
Doing
yeah.
great.
All right, so one of the things that happened in 2015, oddly enough, is people died. We lost Leonard Nimoy.
Oh,
Oh
that was
yeah.
the one that got me.
hmm
Uh,
I mean, I think I posted on Twitter the other day that if an asteroid collided with the Earth and wiped out everything, I'm happy that at least Star Trek came out of human beings. I mean that show just really it's kind of like, everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. Well, everything I needed to know I learned from Star Trek.
nice.
It really shaped my consciousness and who I am. And the key to all of it, of course, was Spock. I mean, who could not love Spock as just an iconic character, in so many ways, and so telling about the human condition and our the problems we have with balancing logic and emotion and things like that. And he was just a stand-up guy too. I mean, just a phenomenal human being. And yeah, that one hurt. I mean, I actually shed tears when Nimoy died. It's very rare that I get that emotional about the passing of someone in the entertainment world. But that was a big loss.
Yeah.
Well, he did write that great song about The Hobbit.
Right.
Bilbo,
Yeah.
Bilbo, Bilbo.
And in
Yeah.
search of, I've recently
In
been
Search of,
Exactly.
yeah.
I've
Exactly.
been watching in search ofs, and I'm telling you, if you can find them and watch them, man, they really still hold up. There was a great one I watched a few nights ago. It was basically about ESP and children, and Nimoy was sitting around with like Zener ESP cards and a table full of kids, and and getting these kids to sort of guess which card he was looking at out of all those symbols. And it was great. I mean, that's that was the beauty of the set, being a kid in the 70s, is this stuff was taken seriously. It was approached seriously. It didn't have the ridiculousness of stuff like Ancient Aliens or whatever, that takes an interesting topic but just
Right,
craps
right.
all over it. And it was an era where you could discuss things like that without people smirking, or and in search of, I think, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that was a key. That was like a the cornerstone of my whole Fortean development.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Was in search of. I mean, that was such a big show for so many people, I think.
Yeah. Well,
And
sorry.
you,
Good.
you can actually get it on Amazon now. They've re-released it on DVD in a box set for 45 bucks.
Oh,
Oh, that's a
excellent.
good
Okay.
price.
Yeah.
Originally it was 150, now it's 45.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah, it's one of those things that I didn't really realize until like maybe the past year or so, hearing people talk about his passing. But he and that the In Search of specifically influenced so many people in this area, and I feel like it's one of those things where
Yeah.
he could have done that, or he could have done, you know, Star Trek, or he could have directed 3 Men and a Baby, and any of those one things would have put him, into a spot in history. But for him to have done, to have this giant body of work is so cool.
And
Yeah.
he also
Yeah.
did Fringe, which was fantastic as far as like the paranormal, odd type of stuff
Oh, I
goes.
didn't
That's
know
right.
he was involved with that. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he was a big part of it, but he
Hmm.
wasn't in it very much.
Okay. Hmm.
So, Mike,
But
what do you think of all these people? Have you read Chris Nowell's Secret Song blog?
Oh, all the time.
Okay, so
All the
what do you
time.
think
Yep.
of his opinion that Star Trek is actually like a veiled way to promote or to make a propaganda about this military type New World Order?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. But to me, knowing the roots of Star Trek and like the Council of Nine and all that, you guys familiar with all that stuff? That
Yeah.
Roddenberry was part of a group of people that like gathered around this channelers and things. And so there's really a deep esoteric element that behind Roddenberry.
Well, sorry
Uh,
to
you
burst
know,
your bubble about that because
oh,
you know
don't
who
burst my bubble, damn it.
Dan Madsen is.
Who?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Dan Madsen. Dan Madsen is the originator of the first Star Trek fan magazine, right?
Okay.
And then
Uh-huh.
after that, he created the Star Wars fan magazine and
Okay.
the
Okay.
Lord of the Rings. So this guy, I met him first at the first Paradigm Symposium in 2012. I mean,
Okay.
it was one of the best presentations that they had in that whole conference, let me tell you. And he told that he became good friends with Gene Roddenberry and also with Leonard Nimoy and Shatner, all these
Hmm.
guys. So I took the opportunity to as a fan of Chris and his blog to ask the question, ask him, I told him about this story of the group of nine, of
Hmm.
this
Right. Right.
story that Roddenberry was somehow in contact through a channeler with these alien intelligences. And according to him, a man who knew Roddenberry, who was a good friend of him, there was nothing to the story.
Hmm. Okay.
Although he told me that Roddenberry was, in fact, very interested in the UFO phenomenon. So I don't know.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
that, right?
That's
Hmm.
So
because he hid all of his secrets on these 200 floppy disks. You heard about that?
Yeah. Exactly.
It
That's
no,
just came
no.
out.
Yep, yep. Um, and in just more pop culture, we lost Roddy Piper.
Oh yes, they live, man.
So yeah, I forgot about that connection. I always just associate him with wrestling. I forget that he actually had a part in some decent movies too. Sometimes.
Yeah, they live is definitely one movie that should be at the top 10 of all the people who are interested in the Fortean realm.
Hmm.
And he was an interesting guy too, and he definitely put wrestling on the map. Without him, Hulk Hogan never would have hit the heights he did. I mean, he was the perfect bad guy for Hogan to fight up against and put wrestling in that spotlight it had in the 1980s. So we lost Lemmy.
Hmm.
Oh
Yep,
yeah.
recently.
Did you hear that people are starting to call rum and cokes Lemmys now
Uh huh.
in honor
Uh-huh.
of him? I like that trend.
The fact that he was doing what he did till pretty much his dying day
I'm
is
sorry, Jack and
fantastic.
Cokes. Jack and Cokes.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
big faux pas there. Okay, yeah, Jack and Coke. Sorry.
But I mean, at 70 years old, he smoked heavily, he drank heavily, he pretty much partied nonstop and made it to 70.
Hmm.
Hmm.
He was the true rock and roll lifestyle, and he influenced a lot of people. But back onto more of the uh, paranormal realm, we have Boyd Bushman's deathbed confession.
Oh yes.
You want to get a little into that, Red Pill?
Well, apparently Boyd Mushman was someone who was involved in the alleged reverse engineering of recovered crashed flying saucers and how they tried to reverse engineer their propulsion systems. But it's such a bizarre, ambiguous story because on the one hand, uh, the guy seemed to have had the right credentials, right? So he
Hmm.
he was a scientist. He was someone who did look into radical propulsion systems. He walked the walk in that regard. He was involved in secret black budget programs, but with this deathbed confession and how he showed these alleged photos of aliens that apparently someone gave to him, which were, in my humble opinion, so ridiculous, so fake. It was something of a head scratcher to me, like something that further convinced me or makes me suspect that there's some kind of safe, secure mechanism with all these potential whistleblowers that they feed they feed them this first with some kind of story or of disinformation that is so preposterous, so easy to dismiss, or so easy to debunk, that somehow it prevents them to be taken seriously,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
afterwards.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
You
because
know what I mean?
that specific set of photos, I mean, you can find within a minute and a half on a Google search a picture of the doll that looks exactly like, I mean, down to the
Yeah,
coloration, everything,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
reported photos, and yeah, uh, it definitely seems like there's a deliberate effort to undermine the credibility of folks like this. The
Hmm.
question is why they went along with it. I don't know if he had just gotten old and, you know, pardon pardon me saying this, senile, or do we know when he was given those photos?
Not to my knowledge.
I feel like it was long enough. Well, I don't know. If it had, yeah. I just it's interesting because it's why someone would go along with that. I don't know. I mean, maybe. Oh, well, sometimes I wonder, and I have before, that maybe there is not only deliberate obfuscation, but perhaps the phenomena, somehow goes out of its way to make people seem less credible.
Mm.
It
Could
reminds
be.
me of something that I heard in one of Christopher Ryan's, podcast. He has a podcast called Tangentially Speaking, and
Mhm.
or I think no, actually, he mentioned this on his later Shrimp Parade podcast with Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell. How he has a friend of his who is like into magic, right? Sleight of hand kind of tricks,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
he's told that his friend will show him a particular trick, and he will do it over and over and over again. He won't tell him what the trick was.
Mm-hmm.
He will just show it as many times as he would like, and Chris will never figure it out. He will never figure
Hmm.
out what was the trick or how he managed to fool him.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, his friend will tell him, "Don't worry, Chris. The smartest people are the easier to fool." You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
magicians. He told this guy to Chris, magicians are always afraid of dumb people and children, because
Exactly.
all
Yes.
those are
Yes.
the guys, or those are the kind of people or the kinds of individuals who will always look in the wrong places where the magicians were not willing or expecting them to look.
Yeah. There's
So maybe,
I mean I've been a magician. It's
mm,
and that is exactly true.
That's
And
fascinating.
that's why I've met um William, what's his name? His last name's Braude or something like that. I think he's a parapsychologist. I met him at a Fortean conference once, and he had done. He wrote a book about a woman that would produce like gold flakes or something. I think he called
oh
her
yeah, oh
the
yeah.
gold dust woman or something. And he was there giving his talk. And as a magician, as a mentalist, he showed a video of this woman producing this gold stuff. And, while it was very interesting, um, I could see just from the couple of short clips that he showed several ways where this woman could have been,
uh,
surreptitiously producing this stuff.
Now
And I
you're
asked,
busting my bubble.
yeah, yeah. Well, what happened is I didn't get much chance to talk with him, but I talked to George Hansen,
Mhm.
And I asked her a chance, and I said, is he? I think his name's Brody, and I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but I think it's Brody. And I said, does he ever take, because George Hansen is a magician as well. And I said, George, does he ever take a magician with him on these things? He's like, no, he doesn't. And I mean, that should be ground rule number one when you're investigating someone who has claims of any kind of psychic or paranormal ability, is you have to have a magician. Because
Yeah.
and I think I told you when the show we did, just me and you, Soraya, is that I did a mentalism demonstration once at a Fortean conference, and I had people come about, and I told them, I said, I'm going to show you how this is going to be trickery, and this is how people do trickery and pretend to be psychic. And I did my routine. And afterward, people were coming up to me and saying, that was not trickery. There's no way that could have been a trick. After I
Oh.
told them, what I'm doing is trickery. This is the whole point of what I'm doing. I had 3 people come up to me afterwards and they said, you are truly psychic. And there's no way, and they would not believe me. And so that
Wow.
that was a very big lesson for me. So if I hear of an investigation to something like that and there's no trained mentalist or magician going along, then it loses all credibility for me.
Yeah.
And it's exactly for that reason, is because the smartest people, the people who think I'm a scientist, there's absolutely
Yeah.
no way you could fool me. Well, yeah, I can fool you easier than I could fool a 3-year-old kid, because that 3-year-old kid is going to be looking in a completely different direction than
Mhm.
you are while I'm doing this stuff. So absolutely, I agree 100% with that.
Okay.
All right. I forgot where we started with this. Oh, it was
Boy
the
Bushman.
photos and
Yeah.
Yeah,
stuff
the Boy
there. Yeah.
Bushman thing.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
and
In a way, it's like a
here's
modern parallel with the Arthur Conan Doyle, and the Cottingley
yeah, yeah.
fairies
The fairies,
photographs.
right? Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But the thing about the Bushman story is that you hear this from so many whistleblowers, and this story of the government having these craft and being back engineered and stuff are similar. They're not the same story, but they're very similar stories.
Yes.
And the people telling them seem genuine, seem to believe them.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of what the government is trying to do, is to create this impression to steer people the wrong way. Because if they didn't want these people talking, these people wouldn't be talking.
Yeah, that's true,
Yes.
but at the same time, I mean, let's look at the guy, look at the Canadian guy who,
Paul Hellier.
what's his name? Yeah, and it's like whenever someone you know allegedly blows the whistle, or even as far back as Philip Corso, whenever there's a whistleblower out there, there's there's always one element or more than one element in the case of Heller, I guess, that just completely destroys all credibility. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always an element to their story that it just, I just completely can't accept. So, are they doing this intentionally? Are they fed material that's inaccurate to destroy their credibility? Or are they doing, is it intentional, or are they being duped? I,
Mind
I
control.
don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's going on?
Yeah.
Good disinformation.
Yeah,
Add to that ridicule factor that surrounds UFOs. Oh, look at what these people are saying. They're
yeah,
clearly crazy.
yeah, exactly.
And also the fact that the phenomenon itself is deceptive in nature.
Right,
So
right.
Sure.
triple whammy.
hmm But it always
Uh,
seems to me that the whistleblowers are always very much in the extraterrestrial camp, right?
yes.
Yes.
So, if, as some of us suspect, um, Nick Redfern, with his with the group he was talking about, that are convinced that they're
The coincidence.
demonic, or discarnate kind of things that are tweaking us. Well, you know that would be a great way if, if you wanted to keep that under wraps, is to put these guys out there with these extraterrestrial stories that then, are seeded with stuff that immediately makes it all fall apart. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Well, it does because I think what happens is the people who want to believe figure there's some element of truth in that story.
Right,
And the
right.
people who don't go, well, look at this ridiculous story. See, UFOs are all nonsense.
Well,
Yeah.
it goes back to the MJ12 thing. There's probably just enough facts in MJ12 that make it seem credible, but there's
Yeah.
enough
Yeah,
bunk
yeah.
that it makes it get written off.
Right, right. That's the key to disinformation,
Yep.
I mean, that's the classic. You throw some real stuff in there and then throw some absolute bunk.
Hmm.
And then
Exactly.
everybody's just scratching their heads.
Yeah, like the well manicured guy in the X Files. They say that the best place to hide the truth is between two lies.
Yeah.
No.
I just say don't listen to anything that comes out of the supposed government as far as UFOs go.
What's that Chris O'Brien quote? Once a spook, always spooky.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let's see. Other losses this year. We had Walter Andrus, who was the MUFON founder.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people are pretty anti-MUFON at this point, not liking what they've become, but they've been important over the history of
I will
UFOs.
jump in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did I speak at all about my interaction with MUFON with anybody here?
I don't know.
Very
I
briefly.
I had the opportunity to speak with at the Atlanta with the Georgia chapters rather annual meeting back on the 13th of December, and it was the most refreshing, exciting group of people that I could have hoped to
Oh.
have spoken with.
Mm.
Awesome.
Very much open to altered states of consciousness ideas. Very much open to uh, different ideas. I'm me. I came in there and I'm talking about fairies and aliens and Sasquatch, and they were and for the most part everybody was on board. There were one or two people who were still stuck in the ETH, but everybody was very much like this could be any number of things, and it's probably a lot of things. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I had some coffee with the state director afterwards, and he says, yeah, he says if we get the hint that anybody is out there trying to prove that every case is little green men, little green scientists from Zeta Reticuli, then we don't let them go out and represent us. And
Mm.
he said, I don't know what's going on, but the answer is not entirely space doctors. And I'm like, wow, this is so. Yeah, I'll because I was sort of move on. There's so much that you could be doing, but that really it was very encouraging seeing it all going in the right direction. I have a
Okay.
lot more faith in the organization than I did a year
Can,
ago.
can I
Yeah.
ask you something?
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us what was the age average of the audience?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Mid 40s. There were a
Oh
couple of people
well.
that I would say are in their 30s. Um,
Mm.
what? Yeah, and also gender diversity. About probably I'd say 70-30 men. So not
Okay.
still a boys' club. The
Mm.
racial diversity was kind of surprising. It was obviously it was probably about 70%. Um, Caucasian, but there was a solid, I would say, 25%, 25% African American base there, which I found
Okay.
sort of surprising,
Mm.
and then like a 5%, mixed other Asian, etc. Um,
Mhm.
uh, which I thought those are interesting demographics that I wouldn't
Mm.
expect, given the old the old white guy is who I
Exactly.
always
Yeah.
think of being involved in ufology. So it was really encouraging to see that much diversity there and to see that much open mindedness. It was a really
Mm.
cool experience.
Awesome. Awesome.
It
All
is
right.
it is a graying demographic, though, I have to say. I mean,
Yeah.
when I go to these conferences, it's we're all kind of on our way to dinosaurdom. And there's there's not a lot of fresh, young people in these, at least at the conferences. Maybe because young people are just more online. That's how they interact. But that's a sad fact when it comes to MUFON or any of these other organizations. I'm a member of Info, the International Fortean organization, and I used to help out with their conferences, and I've done a couple talks at the conferences things. And man, it's I'm the young guy there. I
Okay.
mean, it's
So let
it's
let me ask you guys this: do you think that 15 years from now there will still be large UFO organizations like MUFON?
I would
I don't know.
I would like to see it be more of a, as opposed to being like this sort of quasi united front. I would like to see it almost like a confederation of independent state organizations, and within that, a certain level of autonomy at a regional level within certain states. Um, I think that might be a good way to handle the whole situation, because every time you get an organization too big like that, it's going to
Yeah.
have some of the problems that you get with
Hmm.
with having an organization that large. Whether or not that means that will happen or not, I don't know. But I kind of get the sense that that might be the direction it's going in.
I'm also wondering, as more and more people are realizing all this phenomena may be connected, that we'll see less UFO specific groups and more
hmm,
open research groups,
Mm.
aren't just focused on one aspect of this phenomena.
hmm.
Yeah, and I would also say that I think that I get the impression from some people I've talked to that there is some good stuff happening with the folks who are what's the guy who's the Miami attorney who had a moment of Ray
Oh yeah.
Hernandez, the
Uh,
free, that's it, free, FREE. I feel like they're doing some interesting stuff kind of along those lines.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And another person we lost that I think meant a lot to Red Pill was Bruce Dwensing.
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I've never spoken or interacted with him, but I listened to that interview that he had with my friend Greg Bishop in Radio Misterioso, not long before he passed away, and I remember listening the first time and really not in understanding a thing that these guys were saying. Like it was kind of like rushing above my head,
Yeah,
going
yeah,
way above my way of thinking, and saying, well, let me give it a second time, and finding all this richness in trying to follow the the way of thinking of this guy. And I agree with Greg, and then Greg and I and Robert had this like little homage at Radio Misterioso, trying to give our respects and trying to express what Bruce had given us in way of trying to, like, I don't know, encourage us or coax us to leave our normal comfort zone with regards to trying to understand the UFO phenomenon, which is, I guess, some of the things in which MUFON has fallen into. That they have tried to investigate the phenomenon from a comfort zone, and I think that the UFO phenomenon is the opposite. It's like shaking your belief system, shaking your sense of reality, and showing you that there is a whole bigger world out there that you have no comprehension of, and that the first step is admitting that, like Robert Anton Wilson said, the first thing is, if you think you're what's going on, you don't know shit, right?
Exactly.
You're
hmm
probably full of shit.
Yeah.
And Bruce, I think, is what was one of the persons who understood the complexity of the UFO phenomenon, kind of like try to tackle it from that level of complexity, which made him a bit unscrutable for the rest of us. But there's something about trying to use different forms of I don't know, rationality in order to find new insights into the phenomenon, right? Right, and another thing that happened was that uh, Bruce wrote one last blog post in his personal blog, which felt quite prescient, almost like he kind of sensed that his passing was kind of nearby, and that really touched Greg and Robert and me, and we tried to um, pay homage to him and his hopes to understand the phenomenon as best we could on that little Radio Misterioso program.
Hmm. And those are still available on Radio Misterioso, right?
Yeah. And let me add that Greg is in contact with, or was in contact with, Bruce's daughter, and the last I heard, they were very much in agreement of trying to write a book uh, about Bruce, with not unlike what Paul Kimball did with the late McTonis and his
Right.
Mhm.
post-human blues blog. And I think that would be a good thing, because one of the things I remember we said is that maybe the best homage that we could give to Bruce was that trying to promote his ideas, so that maybe 20 years from now, some kid will find his blog, or will read his book and will have his mind blown, and maybe that kid then will completely alter his perspective on life and change completely, 180 degrees his life journey, and that in itself would be, quite an achievement and quite a legacy to Bruce and to well, I mean, to anyone,
Mhm.
if this what we're doing right now, we guys are talking, but Soraya will later, release this podcast, and think about, to think that maybe 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, someone manages to listen to this MP3 and, change their perspective, if only for a little
Mm-hmm.
while, in only alter their views of the UFO phenomenon or other Fortean phenomena just a little, nudge them just a little in trying to look into the mystery. That for
Mm-hmm.
me will be
Mm-hmm.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that for
Yeah.
me should that would mean that this wasn't, a complete waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's go. Let's move into Dressgate.
I love
Oh
this.
man.
So do I, and a lot of people were just annoyed by it, but I don't think people really understood the consequences of what they were experiencing.
Mhm.
And of course, this is the dress that people either saw as what were the colors?
White, or what was it? Blue and gold, or
White and yellow,
yeah.
white and gold, and blue and black, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds right.
And the first time I heard anything about it, I kind of ignored it for a bit, and then I looked at it, and I was like, oh, it's whatever color. And then I looked at it for a bit, and I went, all right, and I left the room, and I came back, and it was a different color, and I went, all right, what's the trick? And I downloaded the image, made sure it wasn't a GIF. I'm like, all right, how could they have made this change? Because it completely looks different.
Mm.
And on my music show, I had pulled it up to the groans of a few people on the show. And I said, what color's the dress, and everyone looking at the same dress, a few people had different colors.
Mm.
So it wasn't a trick of the light of the room or anything like that. They were looking at it and going, "Oh, it's this," and then someone else is like, "Seriously, it's this," and it's like, and that's what's interesting about it because it tells you how unreliable your perceptions really are.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean
I'm going to be a Grinch here. I'm sorry. I think Red Pill threw a monkey wrench into my Star Trek Council of the Nine theory earlier. But to me, I mean, I've been a graphic designer, you know, for the early part of my professional life, and to me, it was clearly, you know, it was clearly a matter of the it was a white
Monitor
dress. I
calibration.
mean, it was a white dress, and it was the fact that the something in the way that it was photographed made
Hmm.
it possible to interpret it another way. So I completely agree that it was an excellent exercise in seeing how people see things differently. But to me, it was clear. Like if you would have, I used to color correct photos for a living, for a regional magazine, and I would that I would have instantly color corrected, so it would have looked like what it actually was.
Hmm.
So I understand that it's a great way to look at how people see things differently, but it was clearly what it was a badly color corrected image of and anyone who has training in in color correcting photos and things like that would have said, oh, okay, well, this is clearly it's got a blue tint and we need to get rid of that. So that's my grumpy old man monkey wrench in
But
that thing.
I still don't think it changes the fact that that two people can look at the same image and see different colors. It shows you the sort of bias that our senses actually create, and that when people see something, especially something that they're not familiar with,
Hmm.
if you were shown that picture knowing what color it was supposed to be, you might not have had the issue.
Right. I just think there are probably better ways of exploring that phenomenon than that particular image.
yeah, and
Go ahead. I'm sorry,
no, I
Josh.
was just gonna say I agree because I think I had a Facebook status to something of that effect about like, look, anybody who's done anything like with visual arts gets what's going on here, but at the same time it's a nice simple way of explaining some of these concepts, because if you start to talk to somebody about, the idea of co-creating with the phenomena, whatever the phenomena may be, or you start to talk to them about, just perception being flexible, they aren't going to get it. But if you talk to them about the Twitter dress, then they do get it. So I think that's where the
Right.
real value in this comes from, at least
I
from my
agree. Yeah.
standpoint.
Sure. I get that. I do get
And
that.
I remember reading an article that appeared uh, during that frenzy of the Dressgate, or the Twitter dress. I think it appeared in the Smithsonian Magazine website that
Mm-hmm.
seemed to allude to the fact that uh, in the Iliad, or in ancient times, they didn't
Oh
perceive
yeah.
color the same way as we do. Like
Yeah,
something like
that there was no blue.
exactly, yeah. Remember that?
That's another one I have a hard time buying into.
Believing.
Yeah,
Oh,
that people couldn't perceive the color blue.
But it's just
Uh,
like the thing that Terrence McKenna always used to trot out, is how like perspective was discovered. It's just something that we live with day to day. But you look at art, from the time period, and there was definitely somebody had a light bulb moment where suddenly they were able to comprehend that. So I think it falls more into that sort of. I don't think it's that people didn't perceive what we would consider blue. It's just that they might not have realized its significance, or actually have not been processing it the same way that we would, if that makes any sort of sense.
The thing with colors, I always think, is that how do we know we're seeing the same color as someone else? Like what I see as blue might be red to you. I mean, we
sure,
know what it
sure,
is,
sure.
but we can't know what the other person is actually perceiving.
also,
Hmm.
yeah, I remember reading the book Heavenly Lights, which deals with the Fatima apparition,
Mm-hmm.
that which someone like Jacques Vallée will say that is like one of the most important ufological events in
Right.
human
Mm-hmm.
history,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I happen to kind of agree. Even the authors agreed, but the authors read the original parochial testimonies that were gathered by the Catholic Church, that they gathered all the witness to the famous dancing of the sun that happened on, I think it was October the 13th, 1917, not remember that correctly. But the thing that's interesting is that you see all the different individual testimonies, and people were reporting different colors when
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
particular celestial phenomenon happened. Some will say, "Oh well, there was like these reddish disc that was dancing in the sky." And they will say, "No, no, no, it was like more like greenish blue." And they'll say, "No, no, no, it was a silver disc." And they'll say, "No, no, no, it was like something different." And you will say, "Wait a minute, I mean, what happened here? Why is that all these people were perceiving something fantastical, something phenomenal, but they were all perceiving it differently?" And
Mm-hmm.
that's why someone like us uh, will start to imagine, maybe if I were to have a UFO sighting, the person next to me will see something completely different. I will see like a disc-shaped craft, and the other person will say, "No, no, no, it wasn't more like a cigar shaped."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
someone will
Now,
say, "Oh, yeah, I saw nothing."
weren't there people in Fatima who saw nothing?
Not
I believe there were some
sure.
people there that saw absolutely nothing going
I feel
on.
like by sheer numbers, there would have to be somebody there who didn't see anything.
I think most people
I
saw
think
it.
most people saw. Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
the atheists who were there specifically to
Right.
make fun of all the gullible peasants that believed
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in superstitional nonsense. The moment that they saw that thing, moving out of the sky and almost touching the ground, they were on their
Mm-hmm.
knees confessing their sins.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
something, and also the idea that there was such a heavy rain before the event, and
Mm-hmm.
afterwards all their people's
They
clothes
were
were completely
dry.
dried. So,
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah.
you know, it wasn't all just like perception or
Right.
psychological.
Right. Yeah. There
Yeah,
were physical elements to it. Absolutely.
yeah. Mhm.
All right, let's move on to Pluto.
Mm,
And the fact that we finally get to see what Pluto looked like, and it's nothing like astronomers expected,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty much par for the course.
Mm-hmm.
They found the Migo that Lovecraft said lived there.
Yes. Yes.
That-
Thankfully, the fungi from Yuggoth. Yes. I was happy to see them there.
but we do have liquid water and blue skies on Pluto,
hmm
and that's something. Of course, they expected it to be a rock with
Yeah.
nothing there at
It's a
all.
very active world.
but not a
Yeah, that
plant.
was.
It was a planet once. They should have just left it.
Well, I mean,
It sort of strikes me the fact that it was what we were not expecting makes me wonder how many other things we've overlooked. You know,
Oh
exactly.
yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
that's the first thing that springs to mind.
Mm,
And of course, one of the comments is, with this having a blue sky, but maybe not being primed for life, how many planets out there are we seeing that look like they might be primed for life, but are something else entirely?
hmm
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's
And then again, we talk about life as being us, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
well,
As far as I'm concerned, there could be life on Jupiter, but
yeah. I mean, who knows? I think
Totally
it's
agree.
also. I mean, it's we frequently chastise mainstream scientists and things. I think for good reason, but it's also. I mean, that is a beautiful example of what science can do. I mean, we sent
yeah.
a probe out to Pluto and got pictures of incredible resolution. And I know some people involved with that project, and
Oh.
I could just imagine what it was like to have spent, years of your life, making this tiny little thing get all the way out there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then to get these enormous high resolution photos that completely dumbfound you as far as what you were expecting to see. How cool,
Well, the
that
sad
must.
thing is that it only dumbfound a small percentage of the population because, the large majority really didn't give a crap about, oh,
Fair enough.
we sent a spacecraft. Oh, never. Who cares, when does the next iPhone is released?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Although,
Sadly enough.
Michael, that occurs to me. We're talking about because yeah, usually one of the first people to criticize science, but yes, it felt like real science because
Yeah.
it was approached with openness, a sense
Hmm.
of wonder, a sense of exploration, and
Yes.
a sense of accepting the data even in the face of challenging preconceived notions. It was not something that was dogmatic. It wasn't throwing out data that didn't fit an existing model. It was the best of what science can be in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's a great way of
Yeah.
putting it.
Yep.
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 Yeah.
And I always wanted to see Pluto. That was the planet I was always the most curious about, and I'm glad it's not just a dead rock.
Well,
Mm.
now it's nowhere but down for you, sir. I'm sorry.
That's exactly. I'm done.
uh,
Um, so let's look at a weird one, and that's the Bear-stained bears.
Oh, yeah.
And this popped up, and I'm looking for the term for this because there's actually a term where people remember things
oh, it's
differently from what they
the
are.
Mandela effect. Is that it?
That's it.
Yeah,
Thank
Yes,
you.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I have a personal story about this, and I
okay.
worked for a public television station, Maryland Public Television, in the 1990s. As a matter of fact, that's up through late 1990s through I think about 2000, two or three or something like that. And I remember because part of my job was every once in a while I'd go through the listings that they would put out, and I'd look for typos because I have an eagle eye for typos, except for my own. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
and I remember looking over the listing of the shows, the kid shows, and I thought Berenstain Bears, Stain, that has to be wrong. And I went and checked, and I went, no, it's actually because I thought, well, it has to be Berenstein, I mean, that's the
Right.
only thing
Mm.
that makes sense. And so, years before this popped up, I had this experience, and I really do think it's only because we're so used to seeing the word Stein, spelled
Yes.
Stein, that, and plus you think stains just kind of like a gross word, you don't want to have a kid show like, the stains. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just kind of
Mm.
grotesque. But so this this hit me a lot earlier. So when I saw this pop up, I'm like, wait a minute, man. I've already been there, a- and it is a great example of how we just see something and project onto it. I would love to believe that it's because of some weird time slip, caused by these children's books that changed everything. But it really is it's a great illustration of just, when we're so used to having a particular pattern, and when something breaks that pattern, it just completely doesn't register at all.
You
Yeah,
know,
I
oh, go ahead.
agree, but at the same time, it also illustrates, how on the last show we talked about the difference between evidence and proof, and how difficult I think this illustrates how difficult it will be to prove that you can actually jump from one side of the multiverse to another. How could you prove such a thing? What evidence could you gather? And if the
I think
whole
you could, yeah, I think you could go back and, pick up these books when they first came out. You could look at the contract that, the author signed and things like that. So I think that the proof is pretty easy to find. In this case, it's more of a perception. It's more of a perceptual. It's a great lesson, and 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 our general perception, I think, more so than any jump in the multiverse or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I would agree
But I'm a
100%.
killjoy. Right, clearly,
Well,
it's my night to be the killjoy.
yeah, if we're looking for a completely prosaic explanation, I seem to recall the name Berenstain really only appearing, of course this could be completely wrong, really only appearing in like the cursive script on the front of the books and not really in the regular clear typography inside the books. And if you look at that signature on the front, it's really easy to sort of gloss over and think it's an E instead of an A because the general shape is kind of the same.
Okay.
So I think that might have something to do with it. But I will say that if we did indeed jump dimensions, then maybe this is something that's been that's been around since the contracts were signed. It doesn't necessarily mean we switched in midstream. It was just one little tiny thing.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, but yeah, I do think it's just one of those. It's at any rate, it is fascinating that everybody has this moment. It's like, no, it's Berenstein, right? Yeah.
Honestly, I had no opinion.
I mean,
But I think when I looked at it, I thought the same thing Michael did. You don't expect it to be Berenstain. You expect it to be Berenstein.
Right, like Victor
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Yeah, I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
I mean, is that a Germanic Teutonic suffix to a name that you see sometimes? Stain. I don't really know if I've ever really seen that anywhere.
No, I don't think so. Now, one of the other Mandela effects is when you think someone's dead and then they die, and you go, "So they weren't dead already?" And that's happened many times where I'm like, "I could have sworn they were dead.
Yeah.
How are they still alive?"
Mm,
But that can just be faulty memory too.
Yeah, I think that what's set this apart is that it was like this collective thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of collective ones.
mm.
If you go to the site, I think it's just
Oh
MandelaEffect.com. Yeah,
man,
MandelaEffect.com. They have a
nice.
list
mm.
of all of them.
Hmm.
And like, Billy Graham's funeral on TV. It didn't happen as of
Uh-huh.
September 2015.
Right.
He's still alive, but a lot of people remember it.
Or Donald Trump seeing Muslims cheering when the uh, when the two towers came down.
Yeah.
Which he
Yeah.
I mean,
still insists he saw, which never happened. But
Donald Trump
people
thinks that
believe it.
Paris is in Germany, so there you go.
And there's weird ones like some Ghost Hunters TV show. Some remember the earliest show name as Taps, not Ghost Hunters. Yes, we know the real life team is called Taps, and some of their gear has always said that. But I'm guessing that's people misremembering.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, but can we talk about the 51 or 52 states? Who are these people?
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
never
even
met that
know that
person.
one. Wow, I haven't even heard that one.
the extras are usually Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, neither of which are actually states, obviously.
That's called poor education.
That could be.
That's
But
called that's called the duh effect. Oh,
Yeah.
Star Trek memories, including Chakotay character killed and then returns several episodes later without much explanation.
hmm.
He says, I've talked about this in person with Robert Beltran, who played the character. He's sure the version was never written or filmed.
See, to me, some of these I would almost call this more of a play it again Sam effect. Bogart never says play it again Sam in Casablanca. He says play it Sam.
Hmm.
And I think it more has to do with the fact that things just get sort of ingrained in popular culture. I mean, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
one of these here is Henry VIII's portrait with a turkey leg in his hand. I think that was just probably this pop culture commentary on him being obese that just sort of got lodged in our brains and
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
stuck in our head.
Now,
So, I mean, it's interesting, but I don't think there's anything paranormal about it.
not necessarily. I mean, have you guys heard or read the short story written by Jorge Luis Borges, Tlonc Ucbar Orbis Tertius?
No?
No?
So this is the idea that by ingraining or implanting this story or this a notion into the collective unconscious or into the mass culture, it somehow uh, manifests itself eventually. So, I mean, like something like by if you manage to make some enough people believe in something, it eventually becomes true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to we have heard about. The idea that of tulpas, thought forums, that
Right.
it's something
Mm-hmm.
that it's common knowledge, in our circles. What about a collective tulpa? You know,
Mm-hmm.
could is
Sure.
something like that possible? Yeah, and could it be the reason why uh, we believe such nonsense like I don't know, religion, or the idea behind, yeah, no, the idea behind the ancient gods.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. All right. Let's go off in a completely different direction.
Hmm.
Maybe the Berenstain Bears were ancient gods.
Exactly, where
Perhaps.
Bernstein is the Anunnaki trying to disguise themselves.
No, they're big and hairy. They're the Nephilim.
Yeah, no, the Nephilim.
Nephilim bears.
But
Papa and Mama Nephilim. Yeah,
I've always preferred Nephilim,
yeah.
So,
or it's actually Nephilim, I think, is what it is.
Nephilim.
And it just doesn't sound right to me. I'll go with Nephilim.
Mhm.
I mean, it's changed. It was Nephilim, but now it's Nephilim in
No,
another
that was in
universe.
the other dimension, Soraya.
So in a more of a pop culture thing, but a big event for this year, the new Star Wars movie came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Thoughts, everyone?
yeah. I went into it very skeptical, because as a kind of a Star Trek purist, I basically vomited in my mouth when I watched J.J. Abrams Star Wars reboot. And I recall an interview with him where he said he never got Star Trek, so
You mean Star Trek reboot?
that made me mad. But I was actually pleasantly surprised, and I I enjoyed I enjoyed the new Star Wars. I thought it was fun. It was light.
Mhm.
It was a lot of pandering and callbacks to the original series and
Sure.
to the fans and all that. But whatever. Um, I was I it was a pleasant experience, which as a cynical guy, I seldom have, especially with these big tentpole pictures.
Hmm.
I thought it was fun, and that's what the original Star Wars was. I mean, I've gone back and I watched the original, Star Wars: The New Hope, with my kids, and they were kind of bored, you know.
Yeah, I would think
Uh,
so.
yeah, and because they've grown up with Harry Potter, they have a different idea of what movies are like, and it
Mm.
really it made me understand that Star Wars it's an okay movie when you look at it from a perspective now,
Yeah.
and but back then it was so different and so exciting and so unlike other movies, and the mythical resonances were fresh. All that Joseph Campbell, heroes quest stuff was very exciting. It hadn't been done to death at that point. So for me, I Star Wars was great because it was what it was when I was who I was back then.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and it's a different experience watching it now. I don't, my kids don't get it. I don't expect them to get it because they're not things have changed so much. So, for this film, it was a nice, and I'm a big critic of, I've ripped Abrams a number of times, for Star Trek and for Lost, for for other things, but I think it was nice fan service. It actually, unlike what he did with Star Trek, I think he actually understood Star Wars and what it was. And I left. I had a smile on my face most of the movie, even when I know I was being, manipulated, in a sort of old fanboy sort of way. It
Right.
was fun. That's ultimately it was fun. And
See,
go ahead.
you and I stand on opposite ends of that because I loved what Abrams did with Star Trek,
Oh God, I'm
and
getting off right now.
and
Goodbye.
and and Lost is one of my favorite shows of all time.
Oh, Soraya. I can never protest after that. I'm sorry.
I felt that Lost had so much Fortiana mixed into it that it was just brilliant.
I haven't finished watching Lost, on Netflix.
Oh well,
No spoiler for
don't.
me.
See, I loved the end. I thought the end was perfect.
uh,
I know I'm in the minority there, but I
yeah.
really
I
enjoyed the
think
ending.
I'm going to join Soraya because I've seen those Fortean elements weaved into the story, and I think that Lost is not for everyone.
And
No,
and I
no.
don't.
I loved the show. Um, and no spoilers or anything here, but I remember, I as I got deeper into, fourth season, fifth season, I don't know how long it went on. I kept
Six, I
thinking,
think.
did it go six? Yeah. I kept thinking, okay, I like this show, but it's not going anywhere. All of these mysteries are
Hmm.
not going to be revealed. And then I
No.
remember reading an interview with Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams saying, "No, no, we've got this. We've plotted this out. It all leads to something."
Hmm.
And as I kept
Hmm.
engaged and I got closer and closer to the end, I thought, you know what? They're lying. And sure enough, none of it pulled together at the end. And I'm sorry.
See, I thought it did. I felt
No, no,
it
it
did pull
didn't.
together.
It all, I'm sorry. It's rare that I invest that much time in something before realizing that it's all a big con.
So,
And,
sorry.
and so, that was, that was a little disturbing, the fact that they said they were pulling all the threads together and they were lying. And Lindelof has basically come out since then and said, well, yeah, it was the pressure from the studio and we were just kind of making it up as we went along, and we really didn't have any overarching sort of theory as to where it was going and why so basically, and I'm okay with that. I mean, as a writer, I understand sometimes you just do things because they look cool or they sound cool or something like that, but I felt like I was gypped and I was strung along under false pretenses that there really was some sort of coherent mythology underlying this show.
So,
See, my view is I didn't want them to explain things.
exactly.
I liked the mystery. If they had gone and explained all the mysteries, it
Yeah.
would have ruined it
Well,
for me. I
no,
liked.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I like having things unexplained. I like things that are just atmospheric. But there was I mean, you can't
Well,
construct a mythology that doesn't have any kind of
well,
coherence, and
Do
it
you
eventually
guys
just wraps out.
do you
Because
guys
the,
that's
think
it.
that J.J. Abrams kind of like was inspired by the mythology of Hydra Seal in order to create Lost
Possibly.
Island?
But let's let Josh say what he wants to say
Yeah,
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
please.
because he's like fuming like.
I'm
before,
ranted out here, Josh.
before
Please.
before I bust a blood vessel, I agree with Michael on the fact. I think the problem that he's trying to articulate, which is a problem that I have, is that in Lost, the central conceit was the mystery. That was the thing that they were always selling. That was the thing that they were always stringing along. And if it was like more of a if the stuff that they didn't explain was more of window dressing, that wouldn't have bothered me so much, or if there had been a more metaphysical, like the island just does this, this is just what happens, if there had been more of that, then that would have settled with me more. I am going to jump in on Star Wars with an incredibly unpopular opinion. opinion. I
Uh,
passed over my link to my old Wikipedia page because I used to be heavily involved with Star Wars. I'd have to estimate.
Real
Yeah. Oh
fanboy.
yeah. I'd have.
All right, all right.
I'm friends with the founding member of Wikipedia. With the founding father rather of Wikipedia. I authored about 300 to 400 different articles. So I
Damn.
I I feel like I'm kind of in the bag for some of this stuff. I loved all the aesthetics of The Force Awakens. I love the way that they handled the old characters for the most part. I thought the new characters were great. I felt like all that was excellent. However, I would pose a simple uh, narrative thought experiment to the three of y'all. Imagine in A New Hope if the goal was to destroy the Death Star, and halfway through they find out about Yoda, and they go and hang out with Yoda, and then in the last 5 minutes they resolve blowing up the Death Star. Imagine that, which I think we all agree would be a horrible plot, in reverse, and that's exactly what happens in The Force Awakens. You have this sudden complete shift halfway through, as if two different scripts have been mashed together that just doesn't make sense. One of the big criticisms that came out when Return of the Jedi first came out was that it was creatively bankrupt to do another Death Star. I agreed with that then. I wasn't alive then, but I agreed with that sentiment for that film, and I agree with that sentiment for this film too. I mean, you might as well name the darn series Death Star Wars. I think that's a horrible. Just give me something, anything more original than that. I also have some fundamental problems for just like extreme coincidences that aren't accounted for, like the presence of the lightsaber in the bait. Or we're doing spoilers?
There,
Spoilers.
let's not do too
Okay.
many spoilers.
Well, there are some other very coincidental things
Yes, no, I agree with that.
that really bug me. And what frustrates me is that I feel like it's one of my favorite internet movie sites has this rallying cry of one draft away, because I all felt like the movie was like literally one draft away from being like just an amazing film. And part of that is just like simple lines to explain some things, just a line here or there that would have helped it feel a little bit less choppy. So where I sort of fall on it was, like I said, I loved all the peripheral stuff. It's a great way to restart the franchise. The aesthetic is completely nailed. I just have a feeling like it felt like there were some plot decisions that just did not jive with me at all.
The quote I liked is George Lucas saying he didn't like it because they gave the fans what they wanted.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this is why the prequels were crap. All right, let's,
And that he sold it to the white slavers. Yeah.
Yes. But the I don't know. I liked it. It didn't blow me away. I actually expected to like it more than I did. But I did enjoy it. Like Michael said, I smiled. It made me happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
I
was
had
a
lot of the
nostalgia
favorites.
trip, I mean, it really was a nostalgia trip, and he nailed that. He nailed that very well. And I guess, I mean, probably the difference here is that I was never a huge, blog, Wookiee blog making fan. No, and I don't say that disparagingly. I have friends that are mega fans of Star Wars. But to me, it was just like a nice, trip down memory lane. And I didn't think about it that much, but I completely understand how people who've thought about the mythology would find flaws in this film. For me, it was just like putting on an old comfortable shoe. I mean, it was just like, oh, it looks like Star Wars, and oh, the old characters are popping up and all that sort of thing, and it was just like a, very, very basic, simple, fun experience. But I completely understand how those who are, sort of, really attached to the mythology and things would not have the same experience.
One thing that I will say about J.J. Abrams is that he is amazing at shot composition, and he is amazing at casting and finding people who are charismatic. I mean, you look at every project that he's been associated with, and there are zero problems that I have with any of his casting. So kudos to him on that.
Yeah.
I personally enjoyed it. I think it was, kind of like playing it on the safe side. After all, this was a movie that was supposed to generate, I don't know, a $5 billion industry, you know? So I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah.
yes, there was the obvious pandering to the fanboys. But
Mhm.
in my opinion, it was orders of magnitude better than the goddamn prequels.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think
Those,
yeah,
anyone
those were
would
just
disagree
crap.
with that.
yeah, and one thing I want to say to Josh, if you didn't see the original movies in the movies, in movie theaters, it doesn't count. You know, all your Wikipedia.
Ouch! Ouch!
Yeah, yeah,
Ouch!
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
Han
and,
shot
and,
first, damn it.
and, and, and when you look at those original movies, it goes back to what we were talking about. I don't remember if it was this show or the show before about attention spans and stuff and how we look at things so differently today. Back
Yeah.
in 1977, when that came out, it was a very slow paced movie, but so were a lot of space movies. If you look at 2001, I mean, that was incredibly slow paced. Not a lot actually happens in 2001.
Hmm.
right.
You have movies like one I love is Silent Running.
Oh yeah, love
Mhm.
that. I just rewatched that as a matter of fact. Yeah.
And Silent Running has no real action in
Yeah.
it. It's a
Yeah.
very slow paced movie.
Yeah.
It would bomb if they
And-
did it today, but at that time, in the 1970s, that was fine.
Yep.
That's what we
Yep.
expected.
And The
Blade
Force
Runner
Awakens
has
is
only like two action scenes in the whole movie.
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, and The Force Awakens is edited within an inch of its life. I mean, there's zero fat on
yeah.
that movie.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I like Star Trek. I like the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
I watched everything after it.
Mhm.
I enjoyed it at the time, but I don't enjoy it looking at it now. Like I could still watch the original.
Mhm.
I actually enjoy most of the movies. But when I try to watch any of the other series now, like if I go back and watch an episode of the Next Generation,
Mm.
it just comes across so campy to me. I can't watch it.
Mm.
So I think I liked what Abrams did. I mean, Abrams, it's not a Star Trek movie true to the original, but I think he gave it a shot of life that it's needed for a
No,
while.
you're pushing my buttons, Soraya.
I actually enjoyed the first Star Trek movie more than the Star Wars movie. Like when I watched that first one, I got done and went, I want to watch that again.
Oh God,
In Star Wars,
I
was
was
like,
like vomit off my lap.
So what's another story from 2015? Let's
yes, let's get back to that.
Now we've
Yeah.
shown our true geek colors.
Yeah.
Well, staying in media, the X-Files was announced to make its return, which it's coming back this month, January of 2016.
Yeah.
And we'll see what kind of impact that has. I mean, it had a pretty big impact on the world of the paranormal when it came
No,
out.
more than the world
Yeah.
of the paranormal. I think that
Yeah.
it dictated the whole zeitgeist of the
Oh yeah, yeah.
late 90s. I mean, the idea of
Yeah.
the government is lying to you. You know, it's
Yeah.
embedded in our culture. And it's never going away.
There's another analogy too with Lost, and that I think the X-Files got bogged down in its convoluted mythology, and
Yeah.
that's what sort of that was kind of a problem with that show. It got so convoluted that I think it kind of lost its central premise. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it defined the whole paranoid conspiratorial worldview of the 90s like nothing else.
Hmm.
And I think both shows suffered from both that and Lost suffered from the same problem, which is they didn't have an end point.
yes.
They weren't said,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
you're going to do 5 seasons and that's where your story concludes. It's like, just go with
Mhm.
it. And it's like,
Mhm.
Hmm.
well, what do we do now to stretch everything out
Right.
if we don't
Yep.
know when it's going to
Yep.
end?
Yep.
Well, and here's so to put this in a little bit of a fun light, the things that that the original X-Files series drew on were actually kind of, for the time, pretty deep cuts into lore. I mean, there were MJ12 references. There were,
Mhm.
I think, at least some vague Kecksburg references, and obviously the Area 51 mythos. But they definitely tapped into what was happening in ufology at the time.
Mhm.
What has happened in the years since that you would like to see them tap into? Anybody?
That's a great
Man.
question, man.
Thanks.
Ooh.
Thanks.
Whoa.
I have
And I have no idea.
How about
Black Eyed
people?
Kids.
How about people?
Hybrids.
Yeah.
Hubris, yeah.
How about people going to an ayahuasca
You know
retreat
that they
in
actually did. They actually
Brazil?
did an ayahuasca episode.
Oh, son of a
Did
bitch!
they?
I'm showing.
It was a yage. That was what they called it in the
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
Yeah, I like the Black Eyed Children
yeah,
one
that's a good
part.
idea.
That
Who
was
said that?
X
Who said
Files
that?
really well.
that's
That
a,
was
Me?
Red
that is
Pill.
I say that.
that is a good one.
Yeah, that's a real good one.
Yeah, but where does it
Uh,
go? I mean, I feel like the paranormal.
Slenderman, man. Slenderman.
Slender Man, there you go. But I feel like the
Yep.
paranormal has been kind of stuck in a rut. I mean, I think it was the Anomalist posted on Twitter a few days ago that was ufology stuck in a flaccid stage.
That would have been my friend Chris Xavier,
Yeah,
who also
Nice.
writes for the Daily Grail.
and I tweeted back like, no, it's just in its prolonged refractory period. But
Yeah.
but it's true. I mean, I feel like there's not the same like vitality. There's not the same
No,
there's not the same like fresh novel ideas.
no.
That there used to be. I mean, yeah, you said Slender Man, Black Eyed Children, but even those are sort of kind of almost on the way out at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great question. What are they going to tackle?
Because that's what I've been wondering. It's like, oh, it's so exciting! I can't wait to see what they bring to. What are they going to bring to it? Because I think
Yeah.
the areas that I find most exciting, areas like altered states of consciousness and what that could mean to the UFO phenomena, are not going to make for good television.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no.
I mean, maybe the writers will just watch a bunch of old Twilight Zones or something and rework them because it really all goes back to the Twilight Zone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe it'll start with people disappearing in the woods mysteriously.
There you go.
Yeah,
You know what?
yeah, there we go.
I bet that is very possible storyline.
Let's see, and let's keep on media here for a minute. There's the Travis documentary was released,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was actually very good. Have you guys
I
Have
seen
not
it?
seen that.
No.
Travis came to a Ford Fest
Hmm.
in Baltimore and the director was there. She presented the movie and it was great. It was my first time meeting him. And he really comes across as a stand-up, straight up, no nonsense kind of guy. If I
Yeah,
didn't already have a lot of confidence in his story, it really cemented that. But I thought the documentary did a terrific job.
it's not for someone who doesn't know the story though.
Okay.
Yeah. It's clearly aimed at people who are in the know. That's for sure.
Yeah, it kind of jumps into the depth of it and just runs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, this is really interesting. That the thing I found probably the most appalling was where they were talking about how Philip Glass was offering the one guy all this money to say that nothing happened, and the guy's like, needed the money, but I couldn't do it.
Mm.
Yeah, that's very telling.
So, but yeah, I thought that was really good. Apparently, the copy I have is not the finished copy.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was 100% done when you saw it,
Yeah,
Michael, because I know
it looked pretty polished when I saw it. I think it was the final cut.
I thought mine was too, and then Peter said they were working on another cut of it
Huh.
because Peter Robbins was heavily involved with
Okay.
it.
Well, so to jump a little bit, but while we're still in media,
Mhm.
another exciting '90s resurgence is Twin Peaks is coming back.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe, aside from the X-Files, one of the most Fortean
Yes.
TV shows and very groundbreaking. I mean, so that's super exciting. I mean, as far, I mean, talking about Mike Cleland, I mean, that was the first show to link owls
The
and
owls are
and
not what they
UFOs.
seem.
The owls are not what they seem, and
Yep.
there was an intercepted message picked up from the NSA that that's where the owls are not what they seem was came from, and I mean, it just I thought a brilliant, brilliant show that really changed, television forever.
And was on for far too
Far
short.
too
I
short,
mean,
yeah, and it's another example of they basically, ABC said, okay, we got to call it quits, and they had to quickly wrap up a show that had probably had a lot more that it could have done.
yeah, it felt like it was just getting
Yeah,
going.
and it ended very abruptly, and
Then they did a prequel movie.
yeah, Fire Walk with Me, which was great.
Now,
It was,
Yeah.
but it didn't. It still left you hanging at the
Yeah,
end of
yeah,
the
yeah.
series.
Well, I mean, I was bitching about mystery for mystery's sake earlier, but my caveat with that is, David Lynch is the king of mystery for mystery's sake, and I never expect Lynch to lay it all out very clearly, So,
True.
that's where you guys can come back at me for
now,
my just hating Lost so much.
I must admit that I haven't really watched the Twin Peaks series, but
Well, you better get
yeah,
yourself
I know. Yeah,
sit down
everybody
and
tells me.
watch that,
But
pal.
I already know that David Lynch seems to be the kind of artist that lets their subconscious take the wheel. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
and maybe that's what one of the reasons why those kind of artistic endeavors eventually get crushed, by the wheels of I don't know, the
commerce. Yeah,
business.
yeah,
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 commerce.
yeah, yeah,
ABC
yeah.
saying, yeah, we have to, end up with this series because there's not making as much money as
Yeah.
we wanted to. Obviously, they're analyzing this artistic effort from the left side of the brain,
Right,
when
right.
Yeah.
whereas was supposed to be, for the right side of the brain only.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And there are certain shows that clearly they never should have canceled. Twin Peaks is one. Firefly is another. Even if the ratings didn't support it, the fan base was so rabid it eventually would
Yeah,
have paid
yeah.
itself
You're right.
Hmm
off.
You're right.
And I was going to say something else and completely blanked on what it was. It was saying about Twin Peaks, but
Now,
let's hope they don't screw that
now
up.
is Twin
Yeah,
Peaks
well,
gonna?
Lynch is involved. I mean, Lynch is directing.
Yeah, he was in
Yeah,
and out.
he was in and out. He and Mark Frost, were really the masterminds behind it, and you could tell the episodes that Lynch directed because they were so very Lynchian.
Yeah.
But he has apparently he has complete, creative control over this. It's going to be a limited, it's going to be a short series. It's not going to be a full length sort of thing, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just thrilled.
Kind of
I'm
like
just
the X
thrilled.
Files.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, yep,
Well,
exactly.
and if 2015 proved anything, it was the highly unlikely probability that long gap sequels brought to you by the original creators could actually be good. Mad
Of
True.
Max Fury
course.
Road and Creed
Exactly.
Oh
both
yeah.
being, good examples of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it gives me
Good point.
some extra hope for these continued long gap sequels, because before Mad Max Fury Road, I can't really think of anything else that was like a long gap sequel that was actually of real quality. Indiana
Hmm
Yeah.
Jones, Star Wars, none of it, none of it ever really.
Yeah, yeah.
Blues Brothers
I
2000.
I didn't mind the fourth Indiana Jones movie. I didn't think it was anywhere near the first three, but I thought overall, if you cut out a couple of the really stupid bits, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
all
I
right. It
agree.
had
I
some
agree.
interesting ideas.
I'm sort of an apologist for that film too. It definitely.
I like the fact that it wasn't extraterrestrials.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was amazing that they actually slid that line. Do they come from
The
space? No, from the
space
spaces
between the
between spaces
spaces.
into a
Yeah, Greg
mainstream
Bishop loves
film.
that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's great.
I mean, I could have done without him climbing into the refrigerator at the beginning and surviving a nuclear blast. I could have done without them swinging through the trees with the
Oh man,
I
monkeys.
think
yeah.
the guys in Fallout 4, like made a blooper, but or a homage
Easter egg.
or made
Easter egg. Yeah.
made fun, Eastern egg out of that. There is a place, if you find you can find the refrigerator with the remains of Indiana Jones in the
Nice.
post-apocalyptic wasteland.
But if you go back and watch those original movies with today's eyes too, they were pretty cheesy in spots as
Yeah,
well.
well,
Um, the other thing you notice with television now is back in the 90s, things would get canceled because their ratings weren't high enough. But nowadays, you'll get especially sci-fi shows that are doing great in the ratings, but they cost too much, so they'll dump them.
mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, that's not cool. Because you like Farscape, I think was the first casualty of that. Farscape had fantastic ratings, and they canceled it. And people were like, "Why would you cancel this?" And they're like, "It costs too much."
Hmm.
But yet, I remember. I mean, I've been reading about the original Star Trek, and it was the same thing there. I mean,
Yeah.
they were spending so much money in Columbia that this CBS was just freaking out about how much money was being spent per
Yeah,
episode of the show. So I think
Mhm.
that's maybe that's science fiction in general. I mean,
true,
it's
true.
hard to do it on the cheap. And
You can do it a lot easier now.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's look at some more on this list here. Oh yeah, there's the family that's now are they suing Area 51? I know Area 51 wants to take some of their land.
Yeah,
I think they
they're
took
taking
their
their
land.
mine.
That's what it is. Okay. I heard about this in passing. Can you go into a little more detail about it?
Well, this is a family that has been running that mine for at least 100 years, right? Yeah. So they were there before the United States government decided to find that strip of land and build their secret base, right? And
Mm,
at first the family welcomed the government because they were, good old American patriots. They were doing their duty. They will invite, the Air Force officers for, coffees or breakfast or whatever. And after the Air Force built that that base, things went sour pretty quick, right? Like the they will start to like conduct experiments or bomb tests, and that will disrupt the business of this family, and then eventually their mine stopped being profitable to the point that they will only go to their property like only on holidays or weekends. But then, as the Air Force started to secure more public land for the Groom Lake testing sites, eventually this family uh, they literally had to go to a security check in order to visit their own property. And it's kind of it's kind of a weird story because at one point you say, well, why didn't you like quit and sell your property to the Air Force and say, the hell with it? And and for some reason these people wouldn't, after the Air Force apparently offered them like $5 million for a mine that wasn't really, worth anything by then. You know, the, for a moment you want to put your tinfoil conspiratory hat and say, well, maybe the mine is like the secret entrance for their underground base, where they keep they keep all the crash flying saucers or something, So it's a weird story, partly it's a story of um the injustice of the government, going after citizens, and using all their power to get what they want. And at the same time, it's like, feeling that there's something else that you're not getting. You're not getting the full story of it.
It's an
Yeah.
interdimensional vortex in the mind. It's
Exactly.
obvious. It's
And
obvious.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, well, there's two things I want to say off of that. One, it's funny that now everyone's just accepts that Area 51 existed, whereas for so many years they'd be denying it, and you'd have people
Mhm.
also denying
Mhm.
it.
Right.
Oh no, the government wouldn't lie to us, and then they come out, oh well, yeah, Area 51 exists, and most of us are like, well, yeah. Did you really think
Duh.
that was a secret anymore? But the other thing is, have you guys heard this story about this guy who disappeared in this H-shaped cave?
Nope.
No.
No, what?
Okay, this guy claims he was out in the desert, and I don't remember exactly where. I'm trying to look it
New
up,
Mexico?
and yeah, something like that, New
Yeah,
Mexico or something. And he claims to have come across an H-shaped cave. It looked like a letter H, and he said the vibrations coming off the cave were so strong they were making him sick,
Hmm.
and he was going to go back home and come back with um, like equipment to prove that this thing existed, and he disappeared.
Huh. When was this?
Just within the last few months.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm not finding the article on it, unfortunately. But there was a whole internet thing where they're looking for the guy because he was posting YouTube videos of his explorations,
Oh.
and he was talking about how he found this cave and it was really weird and it scared the hell out of him. But he wanted to go back and get some footage and stuff of it, and that was the last anyone heard of him.
Hmm.
Sounds like a viral stunt for a movie.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Although I think that
let's watch. Let's keep an eye on that. And, I mean, it sounds like the perfect setup for Paranormal Activity 8 or whatever the series is up to now.
I think though it's interesting. I feel like way too much emphasis in ufology is placed on the skies and not enough is placed on the ground. Or under
Yeah.
the ground, as it were. I mean, I feel like there's still something kind of weird about that.
Okay, I found the article.
Okay.
The search continues for a 47-year-old hiking enthusiast who disappeared somewhere in the deserts of Nevada.
No.
While the Sheep Mountain area has been known to take the lives of even experienced hikers, the missing persons case of Kenny Veach is very particularly peculiar. The self-proclaimed adventurer sought after a mysterious cave he said once evoked a strange, possibly supernatural occurrence within him. He says, one time during one of my hikes out by Nellis Air Force Base, I found a hidden cave. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M. I always enter every cave I find, but as I began to enter this particular cave, my whole body began to vibrate. The closer I got to the cave entrance, the worse the vibrating became. Suddenly, I became very, very scared and hightailed it out of there. That was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. And so it said months later, Veach made good on his vow and returned to the spot he remembered seeing the cave, along with a trusty 9mm. A video shows him looking for the cave, but despite a new friend in the form of a smiley tortoise, the trip's pretty much a bust. And then Veach returned to the site a month later to find the cave, this time planning an overnight hike. He was never seen or heard from again. His worried girlfriend comments on the video he posted explaining that since he left in November, Veach is still missing. She urges future solo hikers to use a GPS while exploring. So, I mean, that's weird.
Yeah, that qualifies. Yeah.
Maybe related to the story of the family fighting with the U.S. government over their property.
It's definitely an interesting angle, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll know if they ever find him. If he just succumbed to the elements or had an accident, or if he's just never found again.
I'm sure someone has posted it to David Pilatus's Facebook page.
Oh, I'm sure.
If anybody is friends with him or follows him on Facebook, that's always entertaining to watch how many people will just post anybody missing on his Facebook page.
That's because people don't understand that he's looking for certain
Exactly.
criteria, not just everyone who disappears weirdly.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, Red Pill Junkie, you wrote on here there's a Betty and Barney Hill movie.
Apparently, some movie studio decided to opt the rights for the book Captured, co-written by Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman, which deals with the story of possibly the most famous uh, alien abductees in the world.
Hmm.
Betty and Barney
Yeah.
Hill back in 1961, if I'm not mistaken. And apparently, someone is going to make a movie out of them, and that's it's interesting because, well, it won't be the first movie based on that particular story.
Yeah,
It
there
will
was
be
a
the second.
TV. There was a TV movie made.
Yeah,
The the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
UFO
the
UFO
incident.
UFO
incident, right?
incident. Yeah,
Well, and
with
apparently there's
James Earl
also
Jones.
Yeah, and Bryce Zabel is writing this screenplay, I
Mm,
think.
didn't know.
yeah, I'd
Yeah,
heard
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
which should
Yeah, so
sorry.
the original one was 1975.
75, right? Hmm.
yeah. And James Earl Jones, has a
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic performance in that movie.
It was great. Yeah, it was really,
Hmm
really good. Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
part when
hopefully,
he's yeah, sorry.
oh, no, I was just gonna say, hopefully Bryce's involvement will ensure some degree of fidelity to the actual facts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hope so.
Yes.
So I didn't even know that was being made. That's really
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, speaking of which, this year there was this podcast interview with the granddaughter of Barney Hill.
Hmm.
Yeah, you
Hmm.
mentioned that.
Yeah, Angela Overkill, I think is his name in the UFC. He's a UFC fighter, and she discussed uh, well, the story of her grandfather, not in great detail. I mean, it was more about like her feelings about the story. How she tackled with that kind of like quote unquote fame when she was in college or high
Mm.
school or whatever, like, oh yeah, like my grandfather has a Wikipedia entry, and supposedly my father believed that he was abducted by aliens. And there was also the hint that he had been, dishonorably discharged for the army because of due to mental issues, which would have been like a Section 8 discharge. But
Ah,
that doesn't seem to be the case at all because apparently, as far as I have been able to uncover, Barney was honorably discharged from the army after World War II.
Hmm.
And, so there's this idea that, well, yeah, no, that maybe I don't know the what she seemed to allude was that he had mental issues and he ended up marrying this woman who already was on the fringe, being that woman being Betty Hill, and so she finally managed to bring him to the edge. And I
Hmm.
feel that was kind of like unfair. Obviously, after the event became worldwide known, even Kathleen Marden admits that uh, Betty's judgment became quite lax. That every light in the sky would be a
Hmm.
UFO for her, in her mind.
Hmm.
But from there to dismiss the whole story of what happened to them in that secluded place near New Hampshire in 1961, I feel is still a long stretch.
mm. Now I don't remember. Did they have other UFO experiences, or was that the only one?
Yeah, they did have other strange experiences, something that I think that they even tried to manifest like
Oh,
actual
that's
Hmm.
right. Yeah.
Hmm.
contact, and,
Yeah,
and Jacques Vallée was involved in that.
Hmm.
and Betty had precognition of car accidents from friends and all sorts of stuff like that throughout her entire
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
No, I didn't know that.
Hmm.
See, and what strikes me about Travis's encounter is Travis's was a one-off encounter.
So
Hmm.
he says.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think you have two different types of things going on. You have the people who have the experiences their whole lives, And then you have the people who maybe are in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Hmm.
You think that is possible with something like the UFO phenomenon? Like the like that it's a matter of chance, of random.
Yeah.
I'm not
I don't
sure about
know.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It
it's
generally seems pretty planned out.
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah. And I think, people who have, whether or not they're just projecting or confabulating. I mean, people that have, especially contact experiences, most of them wind up thinking, well, yeah, well, then there was this time when I was a kid, and so
Exactly.
Hmm, hmm.
we talk to people, it's among a lot of the researchers. They'll say, well, I mean, I forget, maybe it was Bud Hopkins or something that, maybe it was an exaggeration. I might not go that far, but he basically said anyone who's seen a UFO has probably had some sort of,
No,
personal
that
contact
was Mike
experience.
Cleland who
Oh,
made
that was
like
Cleland.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but even before I knew of Cleland, this was years before I even knew who Cleland was. I remember hearing that, among, sort of the people who were into, looking at abductions and things
Hmm.
like that. So I think it predates Cleland. Maybe Cleland picked it up
Yeah, sure.
from someone.
Hmm.
Hmm, okay. Um, let's go back into like ancient cultures. And there's this article you sent along. 12-meter long monolith found off the Sicilian coast is at least 9,000 years old.
Wow.
Hmm.
And that's huge.
That's huge in so many respects. I mean, like
Hmm.
Graham Hancock keeps writing, stuff keeps getting older, and we keep
Yeah.
finding more and more evidence that our history is like buried beneath the waters, and we
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
need to keep looking for it. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, I don't know, except for a few occasions, we aren't.
Hmm.
No, it's generally by chance. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember there was also an article about a pyramid structure being found by the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anything followed up
Hmm.
on that,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there was an article that happened in 2014, a pyramid structure that was found near the Azores Islands
Hmm. Hmm.
near
I
Portugal.
remember that.
And
Yep.
yeah, and Graham Hancock, I think that investigated, but yeah, I knew nothing further about it.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the problem is like with a lot of the scientific establishment is there's no money
Hmm.
in finding these things. You're not going to get a grant to go out and, spend all the money that you need to investigate something, far below the surface of the water. Money is tight
Well,
in
Hmm.
the sciences, and it's all grant driven. There's very little that goes to, pure investigation, much less looking into something that, is going to upset the apple cart and make you look like a crank, even
Hmm.
for suggesting so. I
when
think that's the real problem. As much as it is, a lot of people believe, oh, they're covering this stuff up, and I think there are a lot easier explanations, a lot more likely explanations. Just there's no incentive to do this kind of research.
well,
There's no money in it. If there's no money in it, unless unless suddenly Bill Gates, takes an interest in sunken, antediluvian civilizations, people aren't just going to go out and be able to find this stuff or follow up
yeah,
on it.
And I think there
So
might be an sorry.
no, I was just going to say, so it's, it doesn't have to be this, this coterie of this conspiracy of establishment scientists who just want to keep their reputation's intact. It's just a matter of there's just no stimulus to go out and look into this stuff.
Yeah, and I think there might be an international component as well. You know, on a lot of different countries, this sort of thing isn't their priority. You
Yeah,
look at a lot of the
sure.
places where some of these things have been found, and they have much bigger issues. I mean,
Right.
it's amazing that we have any archaeological stuff going on in the U.S. with all the stuff that we've got to draw our attention. But
No
I
kidding.
think that's a
Yeah.
component too.
Yep. Yep.
Well, and you got to consider too, a lot of these cultures, like Egypt's a perfect example. They don't want this stuff to be too old because if it comes out of the current Egyptian culture, it's no longer theirs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
there's that sort of pride thing. We built the pyramids. Well, they probably did, but an ancient culture may have laid them out to begin with,
Mhm.
and may have given them the knowledge on how to build these pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not have built the Sphinx, but they don't want to hear that
Mhm.
because you don't want to take that out of the Egyptian culture.
Sure.
Because if it's 10,000 years old, Egyptians didn't build it because there wasn't a Egypt there at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, and who is this we build the pyramids idea? I mean, the people who live in Egypt nowadays are the result of subsequent invasions of Romans and Greeks and Arabs that
Sure.
happened
Yeah.
thousands of years after the pyramids were laid out. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm no different. I have a kind of like a irrational pride out of the fact of speaking about Teotihuacan and
Mhm.
all the ruins that are in my country, even though I know that I'm the product of European invaders
Right. Yeah.
countless of years after those cities were built. I mean,
Hmm.
All right, so that was part 2 of the year in review for 2015. And next week we'll be doing another midweek podcast to cover the rest of the stories that Red Pill Junkie has collected that happened over the last year.